Mr. Jose Arrieta is a leader in applying emerging technologies, particularly blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and process automation. As the former Chief Information Officer and interim Chief Data Officer of the Department of Health and Human Services, he led the creation and implementation of the largest public health surveillance capability in the United States during the coronavirus pandemic. He was also vital in first using enterprise grade supervised machine learning to help accurately distribute testing supplies and predict hotspots across the country. Mr. Arrieta also created a public private key and distributed ledger infrastructure to establish digital identities for commercial, federal, and state endpoints to aid the COVID 19 testing and vaccination efforts. He has also taught at Johns Hopkins University and the University of Virginia. With these experiences on hand, Mr. Jose Arrieta brings his varied take on the state of public inclusivity and accessibility to us today.
Arunima is a design thinker with a keen interest in people, workplace, psychology, and social ventures. She's the director at Ecogenius Foundation. Being an active element and spearhead of the Gaad event in Prakat since 2014, she has quite an understanding of inclusivity and accessibility and strives to shed more light on the domains each year. She's currently working on managing and leading projects in the inclusion space as well as social media strategy. Arunima also co-founded Social Impact Talks, a platform to inform and discuss topics of social relevance, economic concerns, community topics, and health.
Hello, thank you so much for being a part of Global Accessibility Day. It's really lovely to have you here. So I'll just directly dive into some questions. So first, I wanted to understand your personal experience with people with disabilities and accessibility, and what are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, so Arunia, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I certainly applaud you taking on this challenge at such a young age. And I was just really impressed with the questions that you asked me when we talked about doing this. So it's an honor to kind of do this with you. And I told my daughter she's going to have to listen to this because I hope she does something like this someday. And in terms of accessibility and mental health challenges, I actually have an aunt who's mentally impaired. And she also has some challenges associated with getting around, accessibility issues. And so since the day that I was born, I actually grew up across the street from my grandmother since I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And I witnessed firsthand the challenges that an individual that may not have full functionality of their motor skills or may suffer with mental impairments have just navigating everyday life, and the challenges that it creates for their families. In my aunt's case, they told my grandmother that she would never walk, and they told my grandmother that she would never speak, and she was able to do both. Now, she needed to live in care. She needed a nurse to support her entire life, but she was able to speak, and she was able to walk, and she was able to go through and go through multiple forms of education. And it really improved. It really improved her life, and it improved the life of all of her brothers and sisters, as well as the nieces and nephews, which I'm the oldest, that interacted with her. So I like to think that I have firsthand experience with those challenges. I also, from an educational perspective, my son struggles with autism spectrum disorder. And my wife and I have worked very hard through the school system and through state and federal and local government in the United States to give him the support services he needs. And so I know how hard it is and how challenging it can be to navigate those processes. I also know that without the right support, how hard it was for my son in particular to learn some of the basic tasks that you learn in school. But once we adjusted the curriculum and gave him the tools and the support he needed to actually navigate through the school, he started to excel. And in his case, it's not extreme, but there were adjustments and there were support systems that needed to be put in place so that he could grow. We're very proud of him, uh, and you probably wouldn't even notice some of the challenges that he faced. But if we look back like 3 and 4 years, he couldn't even speak really when he went to kindergarten, and now he has worked his way into being able to navigate and interact with other children in his 4th grade class, and they don't even notice that he had those challenges many years ago. So I've experienced it firsthand as a father and as a husband, but also with my aunt when I was younger.
You mentioned that a support system is required, and how do you feel the systems currently support people with disabilities, and what needs to change?
Yeah, so look, I mean, 15% of the global population struggles with accessibility issues. That's about 1 billion people on the planet that struggle with these challenges. When you look at it from a mental health perspective, coming out of COVID, coming out of the pandemic, it's an even larger number of folks that struggle and need support, need to deal with post-traumatic stress, need to deal with issues like depression. I think the real challenge is finding the information. So if you have an accessibility issue yourself, it's very hard to find basic information on a website. It's very hard to find a mechanism so that you can digest that information. It's hard to navigate getting into and out of a metro or getting into and onto a bus many times. Even if the tools exist to allow you to navigate in that way in those environments, sometimes it's hard to find where the access point is, right? And so a 15-minute trip to the metro station or to the train station maybe becomes an hour trip just because you don't know the point of entry and egress as it relates to somebody that has those accessibility needs. I think from a mental health perspective, there's a large stigma around people that struggle with mental health challenges. It's hard for them to feel comfortable talking to somebody about the challenges they may be facing. The pandemic cut off a number of one-on-one conversations that you have throughout your day that serves as an outlet for some of those challenges. And so accessibility, the ability to digitally find the support you need from a mental health perspective, have become extremely important and imperative to the population. So I think that on the positive side of things, the pandemic has forced a modernization effort using technology to ensure accessibility, to ensure access. But if you look at before the pandemic, a lot of those tools didn't exist and the money didn't exist to put those things in place. And there's still work to be done in those spaces. So I think a lot needs to change. I think a lot has changed, but the more that you can give people access, the more you can create inclusion amongst diverse populations, the more you're going to lessen the burden on families, and the more you're going to improve the different perspectives that you're actually getting on different topics, which ultimately will improve outcomes, right? Whether it's related to policy, or whether it's related to the construction of a new office building, it doesn't matter, right? And those are values I think that humanity as a whole believes in and has committed to. And those are values that have to be upheld as we build systems and capabilities to communicate, share information, to empower people so that they have access to information, and to build things so that people can navigate, different situations like a metro, like an airport, like a bus station.
Yes. And I just wanted to understand, you mentioned technology can be a bridge for mental health services and healthcare. Futuristically, how do you feel technology can evolve to have better support systems, to have better access to mental health or healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, if you just focus in on mental health, I think this is an inflection point in the history of the world. there's a lot of folks are talking about the metaverse as this kind of a complete experience where you can fully experience a concert as if you were there from the comfort of your own home. And a concert or a football game or a basketball game or a European football game, soccer, while all of those things may be interesting, the same tools that power a metaverse create an amazing opportunity to create that fully immersive experience for someone that suffers with disabilities. And it creates an easy way for them to connect with other people. And I believe that's the biggest impact that some of these emerging technologies will have. And I'll give you an example. In modern metaverse style ecosystems, like one that Prakat is building with Delrada Technologies and this other company called Imagineer, every individual is going to own their own identity. Every individual is going to own data as it relates to their behaviors in that metaverse style ecosystem. The other interesting thing that I think we're doing, and that personal digital identity is going to be connected to the rails of the banking system itself. So whether it's a crypto asset, a non-fungible token that you own, or that maybe you take a picture during the digital version of a game and you want to store it in your wallet, that's going to be something that you can own forever from a digital perspective. And if you wanted to sell it for whatever reason, you're going to have access to the formal banking system to turn that crypto asset into an actual form of currency where you could transact in a country like Germany, in a country like India, in a country like the United States. Secondarily, I think that if you're going to create a digital experience for somebody, the only way that you can truly create value and merge kind of the digital world and the physical world is if they can be replicas of one another. And everybody focuses on the audio-visual, the AR/VR capabilities that are going to create a digital representation of reality. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't have a mapping of the physical world, then how can you actually create a digital world that mirrors it? And so we're using a mapping technology that literally can map a stadium. It can map city streets. It can map a metro system with a millimeter level of accuracy, and it requires no infrastructure. You can literally map it using the Earth's magnetic pole. You don't need Wi-Fi. You don't need GPS. You don't need 5G or 2G or 3G. You can literally map it with the Earth's magnetic pole. So now the digital world and the physical world can be mirrors of one another. And you can create a true digital reality on the basis of what exists in the physical world, which is truly remarkable. And what that allows is for people in the digital world and in the physical world to interact with one another in that metaverse style ecosystem. Now, one of the challenges from a mental health perspective that comes up when you struggle with accessibility issues or mental health issues, you don't experience the world the same as everybody else. And with the two capabilities that I just talked about that we're working on together, Gaad, Delrada Technologies, Imagineer, we're literally eliminating that barrier. You will now have access to the banking system. The digital world that you interact within, whether it's the Bernabeu, the stadium that Real Madrid plays in, it'll be a complete replica, the physical world and the digital world, including if a box or a chair is moved in the stadium, that same move will occur in the digital world at the same time. Now, the last piece that's really fascinating, and you've seen Elon Musk talk about this when he talks about his acquisition of Twitter, is that many times in the digital world, we've noticed, right, as things like Twitter and Facebook have come to fruition, there's a lot of toxicity. There's a lot of negativity in that environment. And if you look on psychology today, what you'll see is that people, when they can use an avatar, right? When they can be something that they aren't, they have a different personality.
Yeah.
And so we are embedding our technology stack with a tool set that allows people to check in on themselves from a wellness perspective, allows them to understand from their social media activity how they may be feeling, uses voice technology to understand the emotionality of the words that they're speaking, uses natural language processing capabilities to look at the chatter that exists around them from a social media perspective, and develops an understanding of how emotionally it may be impacting them. And that's one step to solving this problem that we all have a sense of self. You've probably learned about this in your basic psychology class. But in a digital world, in an avatar-based environment, people are creating this sense of other. And what we're trying to do is bring those two worlds together with this technology so that you don't have a sense of self and a sense of other. You have a sense of understanding of who you are. And you have a sense of understanding of how this digital world that you can exist in, right? That's going to give you accessibility. It's going to give you access to the banking system. It's going to give you that fully immersive experience. You can have an understanding of how it's emotionally impacting you because it is different. And even if you've never experienced these things from a physical perspective, because you've never had the ability to attend a game, because you've never had the accessibility to engage in these environments, that's still something, doing that in the digital world is still something that you haven't experienced before.
Yeah.
And the last point that I want to make, and I think this is really important, is that we have an ability to actually start to incentivize different types of work. When you can map a stadium with a millimeter level of accuracy, you can offer discounts on food in the physical environment, and you can reward that with crypto assets or tokens, right? You can create an environment where people that share data that they control, data about themselves that they control, that's assigned to their digital identity, that when they share that data, they can receive crypto assets for sharing it. So you can be quicker to engage in research projects, and the people that are actually participating can be compensated. And those projects can be researched in real time because they are consenting to and allowing their data to be analyzed and shared with a research community all around the world, right? So I think it's a really interesting inflection point from a technological perspective, because now you have this environment where people can have experiences that they've never had before.
Yes.
And we can put controls in place to actually give them those experiences in a manner so that they are almost 100% equivalent to what would be experienced in the physical environment. And we can also put controls in place so they don't lose an understanding of their sense of self. They don't lose their understanding of reality. And they can get an understanding and manage it, eliminate the toxicity that may exist around them, which is standard in many of these environments. So the last point that I want to make on that is, one of the fascinating things is that when people interact and they look like themselves, they act a completely different way than when they interact with a mask on, when they're dressed like Spider-Man or Batman or whoever your favorite superhero is as an avatar. And so these are the types of capabilities that are creating different ways for accessibility to occur. And those can be used. You can map a physical subway station and just make it easier for somebody to get on a train. Or you can take that map and you can create a digital world so somebody that can experience that before they go to the train station. Or if they decide they don't want to go to the train station, they can experience it in a completely digital environment. And I fundamentally think that will change the world. It will take, and it will bring billions of people, not just the folks that struggle with accessibility issues. It'll bring them closer together.
Yes, there's so much possibilities that we can use technology with and solve a lot of problems, especially in the space of accessibility. But I just had one last question. So right now, a lot of people are trying to create virtual worlds, and a lot of the real world is going online. We saw that in the pandemic as well. So I just, from a creator's perspective, like maybe designers, developers that might be involved in these projects, how should they keep in mind accessibility for like people with disabilities, even cognitive disabilities, sensory disabilities? Because the whole virtual reality is very visual. So if, for instance, someone has a visual impairment, how do we ensure something like the metaverse is accessible for them as well?
Well, I think the first thing is that when you start kind of designing an ecosystem like that, right? You don't focus on the visual aspects of it. You don't focus on the design aspects of it. That's my humble opinion. And pretty much everybody in the industry is focusing on that. I think you focus on some of the fundamentals that make people people. One is you have to have an identity. So in the digital world, we have to create a digital identity for a person. And a digital identity doesn't require eyesight. It doesn't require hearing, and it doesn't require the ability to speak. There are multiple ways that we can establish a digital identity. Just like you growing up as a little girl in India, you created an identity for yourself, which made you so driven, which is why I was so impressed when I met you. Just like you have an identity, we have to create a digital identity for people. That is a tool, that is a necessary tool to create a metaverse style ecosystem. That is something you should start with. You shouldn't start by trying to take roadblocks and take your business or your sports team and force it to fit into that environment. You should start by creating a digital identity for your fans or for your patients. The second thing is there's no, even if somebody cannot see, you cannot give them the closest thing to a real world experience unless you've completely mapped the physical ecosystem so that even if they are blinded and they have no vision, they can experience what that ecosystem feels like in a digital world. So you need a tool, you need that mapping capability. Again, I'm not talking about the AR, VR environment or the design environment at all. I'm talking about the fundamentals that make you who you are. What is your environment like? I want to map and make the digital world and the physical world the same. Do you have a sense of self? I want to give you control over that sense of self. I want you to have your own identity. It doesn't matter to me if it exists in Facebook or Gmail or Microsoft Office. Your identity can travel with you and you own it, right? It's your details, right? The last thing is like, you know, and I learned this in my time in government. You know, I had a very intense job when I was in government. I had probably, you know, thousands of people that actually worked for me. I was responsible for a multi-billion-dollar budget. It was like a $900 billion in total that I was responsible for, which is larger than most countries. And one of the things I learned is that you have to have some level of self-awareness. So if you can't speak and hear, you need to be able to check in with yourself visually. If you can't see, you need to be able to check in with yourself through your ability to listen or speak, right? And you need to be able to have that awareness about yourself and how you're feeling. And sometimes when you get like super busy or you get super engaged in an environment, the first thing you forget about is taking care of yourself. So the point that I'm making to you is that before we design the AR, VR environment, before we use RF technologies to create a sensation for a person, even if they can't see and they can't hear, but we can stimulate their senses, we have to give you some basic fundamentals. We have to give you a sense of self. We have to be able to give you a sense of what the physical environment is, and it should be a mirror image of what the physical environment would be outside of the digital world itself. We have to give you that ability to check in with yourself. You know, one of the fascinating things about being a human being is if I'm having a bad day, I could call your father. I could call my father. I could call my mother. I could call you to have a conversation, right?
Yes.
And I can also check in on myself and take a break. People need to have that same type of connective capability, both awareness to check in with themselves or to connect with other people within their social network, within that ecosystem. So I think fundamentally you have to give those tools. Once you are able to give those tools, then you can go create a fully immersive metaverse-based experience. And just like you would create a website that's accessible to folks that struggle with impairments, you now have the ability, a further ability, to create a completely digital environment, a complete metaverse style ecosystem that accounts for those needs. And if folks like me and you start to talk about this regularly and start to push for the design of these ecosystems to be like that, it won't be going back and blowing up the metro station to put in a ramp so that somebody that struggles with walking can actually get on the train. Yeah. We'll be building it from scratch. And I think that's the most impressive thing about what we're doing at this conference, which I'm delighted to be invited to and honored to engage in. But that is the most impactful thing. So that's my recommendation. Now, once you do all that, you have the ability to go find smart people like yourself who can actually design those environments, who can actually be the graphic designers, who can regularly redesign those environments. Let's not settle on a cloud provider like Oracle for the rest of our lives. Because we focused on these fundamental tools, we can have a design team that regularly redesigns the environments with modern compute capabilities as they come online so that it becomes more realistic.
Yes.
And that makes it really impactful. So there'll be a number of folks that say that's not the way to do it. I'm not saying that I'm right or that I'm wrong. What I'm telling you is a perspective of how I think about it. And I believe that thinking about it in this way will have the largest impact long term for folks that struggle with accessibility issues and folks that struggle with mental health challenges. And I think it's a really exciting time for people that are passionate about those fields and those areas.
Yes, thank you so much there's so much we can do in the future, and a lot of people here and a lot of people listening to us as well would probably be a part of innovating in these spaces and ideating to make accessibility better for everybody. So, and thank you so much for being a part of this. And it was really nice talking to you today. Thank you again.
Well, I just want to say one last thing. So we need young folks like yourself who are committed to making change and not afraid to ask questions and are spending the early morning hours before school or in between classes engaging in these topics because they're passionate about them. So next time you ask mom or dad for a few extra bucks to do whatever you do on the weekends or when you have time off, remember that I said that and ask for double, okay? And if they ask who told you that, you just tell them that it was Brian Bonner that said it. Don't use my name, okay?
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for staying up this late for being a part of this.
No problem. I look forward to it and I hope we engage again, and I appreciate your time.
Alice Joseph is the Senior HR Director for the Global Diversity and Inclusion Office at SAP. Alice's dedication and vouch for inclusivity in the corporate space is very inspiring. Throughout her career, her roles have involved promoting inclusivity in the traditional corporate space with organizations like Reuters, Wipro, Goldman Sachs, and now SAP. Let us look at her take on integrating people with disabilities in the workspace. Professor Elizabeth Cherian Paramesh is an educationist, public health expert, and an environment protection enthusiast. With several research papers published in national and international medical and social journals, she has authored important chapters for medical textbooks. She is a debater and a poet and has many publications in English and Kannada to her credit. A rank holder throughout her educational career in the Karnataka state, she is also an art enthusiast. Professor Elizabeth has served in important roles such as the Vice President of the Alliance for Health Promotion in Geneva, which is in official relations with the WHO and ECOSOC. She has also been the Chairperson Trustee for the Rotary Environment Foundation. Her role as an international coordinator for ComHAD, the Commonwealth Association of Health and Disability in the UK, is significant. She is also the Managing Trustee of the Lakeside Education Trust. Professor Elizabeth has been on the committees of many governmental and non-governmental organizations and has been a lead researcher for several international research programs of the Padova University, Italy, and World Bank studies. Noted among her several awards and recognitions are the Kannada Rajyotsava Award in 2000 for constructive services to society in the field of education and social service. She was also given the Times Power Women Award in 2019 for making a difference to society through excellence in social entrepreneurship. She was awarded the National Woman Changemaker 2020 by the National Press Council of India and the Newspapers Association of Karnataka. We are delighted to have such an esteemed speaker with us today. Anuradha Biswas is the founder and CEO of Prakat Solutions. She has worked towards building and growing global organizations throughout her career. Being passionate about inspiring young professionals and budding entrepreneurs, she has a special inclination towards addressing social concerns with all possible solutions. One such project is employment generation for people of varying capacities and circumstances, from the disabled to those looking to restart their careers in the technological space. She extends her efforts to make these improvements within her organization. Her stance on disability and its acknowledgement in the workplace kickstarted the much celebrated Global Accessibility Awareness Day in India. which is what we all are gathered here today to celebrate.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's episode on the Gaad event, which is focused on how do we normalize integration of the PWD community into our respective workforces, or in general, anything that we do in life. So as part of that, I am Anuradha Biswas, founder, CEO of Prakat Solutions, and I have two eminent speakers, Dr. Elizabeth and Anas, with me. You've shared the backgrounds already. Please do read up about that. We're going to be talking about our efforts in our organizations and how we can make it a way of life. So welcome, Dr. Elizabeth and Anas. Thanks for agreeing to be part of these discussions. I know you have done a lot in your respective spaces, and I hope this will enrich everyone. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Nice being here this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth. Anas, you're there?
Yes, and thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, step one, it's a very basic one-on-one question, because we have a wide variety of audience who may still be exploring this whole thing of how do we bring in the PWD community. So in your mind, how do people with disabilities into corporate workplaces? What have been your experiences? Some anecdotes would be useful. I do have a viewpoint on people with visual impairment, motor skills, and autism. To some extent, I'm happy to share. But Anas, I'd love you to share that, because I know you've done some interesting things in SAP.
Sure, Anuradha. Before I jump into what we have done at SAP, maybe I can start with a little bit of a background. One is people with disabilities, like people without disabilities, have equal rights to education, employment, and are significant contributors to society. And at the end of the day, it is a skill and talent that meets a need of a job vacancy that attracts persons with disability or without disability to the workplace.
Absolutely.
Right? So, but when we think about our workplace, due to various stigma, social practices, historical oppression towards this group of people, it causes discrimination, lack of inclusion, unwarranted behaviors, and it makes it very challenging and difficult sometimes to be part of the mainstream. Now, this has changed at quite a fast pace in the recent times. Now, persons with disabilities are finding opportunities to work in the corporate places. Many multinationals, NGOs, government sectors are employing persons with disabilities. For us in the IT sector, we are slowly beginning to realize that these are an untapped alternative talent pool that can actually help to meet the demands of talent gap that exists today. And as corporates having an inclusive and a social mindset, it's not difficult to empower ourselves to attract this talent pool of persons with disability into the workspace.
Yeah.
Right. So with effort and with good inclusive intention, persons with disabilities could fit into the corporate workplace just like persons without disabilities who come with their own diversities. And my take is also that we don't need to do any changes for this alternate talent pool. What we need to change is our environment, how we approach, and what is our mindset. And that is what will help them to fit into the corporate workplace much better. So as an example, if you're wondering what I mean by social inclusion, if I have a person who probably has a vision impairment or probably who is blind, but has the skill, is a graduate, say, from one of the top business management institutes in the country. The reason he or she is not able to apply for your job in your company is not because of their impairment. It is because the employer, the company, has not created a job portal that is accessible to this person.
Absolutely.
So you see the movement. It is no longer, oh, is your disability by birth or by medical condition? None of that matters. What matters is, as a corporate, as a company, have you created system that will also include any kind of different ways of working or limitations to your way of working? Are you open to that? So that is how we can actually get people with disability to fit into the corporate workplaces.
Lovely. Dr. Elizabeth, if you don't mind, since this is dear to me and I've put some effort, can I share my views before I go on to you to talk about a few things?
Please, please.
So for example, you talked about social inclusion, Anas. Most often, we all do these compliance checks, what I refer to as tick marks. Oh, there is a ramp. There is things in the proper vicinity where it's easy to use for them. We think we have done our job. But the word you used, Anas, social inclusion. Okay, that is far more powerful than the physical ramp or any other facilities you will provide. The reason I share this with a lot of passion, when we first started working towards this, we were a very humble, small boutique organization where we had bootstrapped and started this organization. All we have as a team is our passion and whatever intent. We could not have afforded buildings which have all these cool features. And way back 12 years ago, it was not a way of life everywhere, right? So we will be honest, we didn't have ramps, but we had the intent. And we had at least in a team of 50 people, we had two people, actually three people. Two of them were partially sighted. One was fully visually impaired, and two people with motor skills. Okay, they were part of the initial C team of 50 people, and we were quite happy with each other because it is just a matter of climbing those 5 or 6 steps to work. Somebody will be there to help you, right? In fact, that facilitates conversations and then there was so much camaraderie. That is just least of the problems. Just understanding their abilities and that the fact that in terms of potential they are the same. It's just that like we may not be able to do certain things. They can't. That's it. If you look at it very casually and just go with the flow, things happen very naturally. And because we built that culture right from the beginning, for our employees, it became a way of life that we will have this mix of people always. It didn't matter what was the size of the team, but they always got used to some of these people. But unfortunately, we still don't have a viewpoint for people with hearing impairment. I'll be honest about that. But yes, there is still a lot of time. We will learn about it. But thanks to some of the efforts we did it with SAP, as I mentioned, Anas, we started thinking seriously about autism. And now we are also doing things with people with multiple sclerosis and learning a lot. We are still learning. We do get baffled. We think we've understood a few things, but we keep learning new things. And yeah, that's how it's ... Dr. Elizabeth, back to you. Couple of things. In your mind, do you think organizations do anything specific to attract and support employees? And then the key question, which is in your scope of work, which is how do we detect early and support them better? Because I have two people who had retina issues very late in life due to hypertension and they lost their eyesight. Okay, so maybe you could throw some light on that, Dr. Elizabeth.
Yeah, so like Anis was saying, I think I'll begin by saying that, there are most, like all of us know, 15% of the world's population seems to be people with, some kind of a disability. But like she was saying, for me, it is not about those people existing there with those disabilities. It is about society being able to receive or accept these empowered people. If they are empowered, are we prepared to accept them? I feel more than them, it's us who need to have that acceptance of these people with their different strengths. I don't call them people with disabilities. I always call them challenged people, because they are able to cross over those challenges and become somebody maybe better than you and me. So are we as people, or you call them employers, you call us whatever, but are we prepared to accept this group of people? You know, we need a certain mindset. We need a lot of training and awareness and a lot of push to accept that they are also very much a part of us. That is where I think social inclusion has a major role to play, because we need to understand that society is a mix of everything. When I say, for example, now in Rotary, I'm mostly talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I find that, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking to a normal group of people who have no other problems. But then when I'm talking about diversity, it doesn't make any sense if I'm not able to accept, or if I'm not able to provide a conducive environment for all these people to be accepted as part of us. It's easy to talk, it's easy to sit on, boardrooms and discussions and say this, but are we actually doing this? And are we actually bringing them into the mainstream? And if they come into the mainstream, do you have that bandwidth to accept them and to actually utilize their capacity and talents? That is one thing. Second thing is, like you asked me about, how these people who are, capable and, but some challenges in the health sector. Let me tell you, I know of doctors, I know of nurses, I know of ward boys who have physical and other disabilities, but have performed extremely well in their fields. I know of surgeons who have been doing so well despite their, polio or whatever defects that they have. So which means that every one of us, I call ourselves also challenged in different ways, or each one of us is challenged in our own ways. But if we are able to come up there, it's because you have a voice, you can talk, you can see, you can walk just like others and reach where you want to be. But we are not providing that kind of an inclusion for these people, or less. If we had provided that, they would have been much better than where we are today, is my confident statement that I can make, because I have seen these people performing extremely well. For example, there was this lady who has blindness as a challenge. You won't believe that she has written 6 papers for international journals. Yes, so it means that they are capable of much more than you and I can think or even imagine, And one important thing in this, where I'm speaking from the health point of view, is that when a person is challenged with any one defect, I believe strongly that the other senses compensate for that one sense of loss. And, they're really able to focus and perform much better than you and me would do. Therefore, I don't call that as a disability or a lack of something. Yes, it's there for you and me to see that the person is not walking like you or talking like you. But believe me, they have so many other senses that make them much more sensitive than you and me. And they're very sensitive. You need to understand that they are very sensitive. They need that extra attention to make them also feel that they are just like you and me everywhere else. Coming to the discovery of these problems much earlier in life, yes, we definitely give that education to people, where we tell them, please do not promote marriages among close relatives. Consanguineous marriages really cause a lot of these problems, and the number of defects that are occurring because of this and the disability, resulting disability, is because of these kind of marriages. So, which, certain communities have taken for granted as it's okay. There is this village, Alipur, a little away from here. If you will go there and if you can see, they are all patients with thalassemia. Okay, yes. And yes, so it's that whole village, but they still will not accept that there is a genetic factor involved, and people have to marry from outside and not within. You can still see they are marrying only within. So you see, you're only continuing to breed this kind of a population with this particular defect. And it's not the person who is born with that defect, it's the person who's creating the situation. So have we done enough to make them understand? We've tried our best, we're trying still to get them into the mainstream, make them understand this is not the way it should be. Second, there is another community in Bhatkal, Bhatkal, which has about at least 60 families who have at least 2 members who are dumb and deaf. Now, how did this happen? It's again because they marry within. Okay, they marry within. They don't understand the need to diversify. They don't understand that they are causing, they say it's okay. It's okay, this one has managed, this one has managed, so we'll manage. So you see, the mindset of people have to be changed. It's not just us discussing, it's a public that needs to understand that these kind of things have to change. You will have to get them out of this whole web where they are, inside, and they have these internal marriages, girl marrying uncle, and it's accepted in many communities also that the elder daughter of the sister can marry her brother, in the sense the mother's brother, the uncle. So it's accepted in many communities. So if there is a genetic defect, you're only allowing it to become more stronger. Therefore you need to identify this right at the beginning. Although we are doing a lot of studies to identify these genes, to find out the genetic reasons, the genetic trait which is causing this. But even if you are studying this, if the mindset is not going to change, how are you helping this? You're not helping this at all. So, it's very advisable if today's youngsters can go through some basic genetic testing before they get married. One. Second, after they get married, if they're having a baby, even before that, they can go and do all the tests are available now. It's not like before where you had to struggle to find a place. It's all there, and you just have to avail this facility and get it done, so you can at least avoid, the future generation from becoming again slave to these kind of problems. However, one very important thing that all of us need to know is that despite all this, believe me, it is society who has to be empowered to, the mindset of society needs to be changed to accept these 15%. If they are empowered and back in the mainstream, are we prepared to receive them? I think that is where I believe that I am working in making people understand and accept that they are also having the same capacity that you and I have, provided you give them the means for it. You have not provided the means for it, you have not provided the facility for it, but they can challenge you and me once they reach where you are able to reach today. That is my take on it.
Lovely. So that's where companies like SAP and several other well-meaning organizations, where Anas comes from, and even a small company like ours, we have in our own ways tried to showcase that this is a possibility, right? That is why Anas and I are here today in the narrative to showcase whatever we can do. SAP is doing it in a bigger way because they have more resources. Prakat is a small company, so we will do it in a we will compensate for physical, lack of infrastructure with our intent. There are various ways, as you say, right? Because many times in India, especially, since this is a global forum, some of the things may not apply to others. So I'll give some perspective to what Dr. Elizabeth was saying. In India, there are some cultures and communities where people marry within a small community for various reasons, and that may not be the norm in other countries. But this is a serious problem in a country like India, where there are large pockets of communities like this struggling with different kinds of health issues because of this particular aspect. Thalassemia being one, learning disabilities. I have seen learning dyslexia issues in some of my extended relatives because we've in the past have been ignorant about it and done that. So that was really, really useful, Dr. Elizabeth. And I suppose more of us have to join hands in being vocal and cross-communicate these thoughts at various strata of society. We have so many layers in India socially, right? That is probably our problem statement. And we have these cocoons and pockets of excellence, which needs to reach a larger community. Back to you, Anas. What have you seen because you've been in the corporates primarily? I'm sure you've been in places where there is enough infrastructure support, like ramps and many other things provided for orthopedic disabilities. What would be your recommendations for neurological issues? Because I'm interested in that particularly because now in this phase of our lives, we are working more with people with neurological disorders. So I was just wondering if, Anas, you have any views, and Dr. Elizabeth too.
Sure. I mean, I think just continuing a little bit in terms of what Dr. Elizabeth shared with us with regards to our approach in terms of social inclusion at the society level and taking it to the corporate level, right? So from that aspect, Anuradha, what I feel is that there are many, many things that are unknown to us when it comes to this sector of the society. when we talk about persons with disability. And there are fears of potential candidates, and there are fears of employers and corporates themselves because of the lack of knowledge. So one of the things that I feel we can, really think about and think through in terms of attracting this alternate talent pool of persons with disability is, one is transparency, and two is being open and meaningful about what you mean by equal opportunity. I really like what Dr. Elizabeth said, that, we can talk about DE and I, but if you're not accepting, then what happens? So how do you show acceptance, right? To have those options, to make it very clear, saying that there is accessibility, there is assistive technology and devices, there is ramps, because these are very important. Pandemic has shown us something very different. But at the end of the day, when we have to go to work, and if we are not able to reach from home to work, then how do we get to work? Right?
Absolutely.
So some of the things that we should definitely take into consideration. When it comes to the neurological diversity, maybe one small example that I can give, and I really love this about SAP, is that when it comes to supporting our employees with autism, our program has something called the Autism Support Circle. Now, the Autism Support Circle, Autism at Work Support Circle is very key to the success of everyone, not just people in the spectrum, but everyone. And there are some key roles in this support circle. One is a coach, who is an external person who has an expertise in neurological diversity, who is able to connect the internal and the external for the candidate, right? And then there is a buddy who works closely with a person with the neurological diversity or with autism, and they always have one-on-one, they have real-time advice and guidance. They are in the same team. Then you have a mentor. Mentor can be many mentors. You can have them in the same location. They also bring in a social and workplace engagement. Then, of course, manager and HR are important. What I truly love about this autism spectrum circle is the personal life support. I think this is something often when we think about companies, we tend to forget. But having that support circle where your family supports you to say that, yes, your job is important. It's important you get ready. You're in office by 9 o'clock. These are the steps that you take to reach office at 9 o'clock, continues to provide that support. So as I mentioned at the beginning, that social inclusion involves all of these people. And the beauty of it is everybody who's involved just ups their game. We become better as human beings and as persons and professionals.
Right. Lovely. Unless you put it so well. One last question for both of you. And I want to summarize what you all said so that I don't miss out the essence. We spoke a lot. How has it affected team dynamics wherever we have been pretty inclusive with PWD is one thing. And in your minds, which careers are better suited for PWDs? The reason I ask this is there are a lot of companies, when I talk to them, especially I'm part of the NASCOM SME segment, and there are a lot of small and medium enterprises eager to start off on this journey of inclusivity, be it digital accessibility or people inclusivity, but they don't know how to start. That's why I'm asking some one-on-one questions, right? What are certain jobs which are better suited? How has it affected team dynamics? It's for both of you. Dr. Elizabeth, maybe if you have any suggestions.
Actually, even before I talk about the jobs that are suited for them, I would encourage them to be part of some, social organizations. For example, like Rotary. Rotary, since the time that we've started this Club for Abilities, we've had given hope to a lot of people that they can be on par with any other leader in any other profession. Because why I'm saying this is not because I'm promoting just Rotary. I'm promoting the fact that they have one platform where they mingle with leaders from various professions. And it's easier for them to pick up from there where they would fit in better. Rather than we telling them what is better for them, they have an opportunity to interact with everyone from different professions and pick up where they would fit in very well. And that is how it has happened to the Club with Abilities, where we have so many people who today are in varied professions run by our own Rotarians, maybe in different fields, because they were able to connect with them and understand that that is their part of interest or that is their job of interest. So giving them some social platform where they can interact and meet other people and really understand that, this is where I belong, will be a better thing than us trying to tell them what you want to do. Many times we do that, we make that mistake. We have to give them the take on what they want to do. And that opportunity is provided only through such social organizations, which will promote mingling of various professions, especially since Rotary is a conglomerate of completely different professions and professional leaders for that. It's nice if these leaders can mentor these people and see which field they suit better. And maybe in Rotary also, like Anis said, we have mentors. And we mentor young people, we mentor people with differences, people with challenges, and these people are able to pick up much faster the kind of field that they would want to be in. And you won't believe that when we look at these challenged people, and when I see that Rotary gives them an opportunity to think beyond their challenges and be of use to somebody else. So when a challenged person is able to create an opportunity for another person or go out of his way despite his challenge and provide some kind of a solution to the problem of another individual, believe me, it doubles his confidence. And that has happened with our people, with these people who belong to this club. During the COVID time, you will not believe that they have had at least 20 or 23 social service activities, which they did on their own. And that was a big eye-opener for me. I said, if they can do it, why can't we? Why can't anybody else? They collected grocery, they went house to house, they went to the colonies which needed help, they provided grocery kits to the families, they provided medical help to families. And these, despite their challenges, mind you, they did this, they went out of their way and they did this. And it was a great thing for me because I quote this example wherever I go and meet the so-called normal people, I should say, and tell them, listen, if they can do it, how much more can you and I do? So, that is the inspiration that I got from them. And so I believe that rather than we telling them where they fit in, I believe we should provide social platforms where they can choose where they want to be aligned with. I think that is what I have learned. And I have found that is a very successful, experiment.
I want to add a small note here. Ironically, women are also in the diversity and inclusion group, right? Women and disabilities. Like women, the PWD community also is always forced to prove more than necessary. You know what I mean? We are not also spared from that, all three of us women. So that is the other unnecessary pressure in society or in professional circles where they need to prove, whereas it's taken for granted that the so-called normal person will anyway do it, which may not be the case. So that's another narrative we have to be very cautious and sensitive about. So Anis, back to you. Do you have, we have 2 more minutes. So if you have any quick words for what you have seen has worked, that'll be useful because of your IT corporate backgrounds, and this is all about digital accessibility.
Sure. Maybe what I'll do quickly is I agree with Dr. Elizabeth completely. I believe that there shouldn't be any jobs culled out and earmarked for persons with disability. Every job, and especially in a company like SAP, every job is open to everyone. And persons with or without disabilities can apply for it. Ask for what they require. Do we not as software engineers say that we want a laptop to work on because we can? So similarly, a person with vision impairment will say, I want a laptop with a screen reader if need be, right? So there is absolutely nothing which we should, stop them from doing. It is completely dependent upon each one's individual. I will leave you with a small incident or a small example of what happens to the teams who have people with disability. This is
No, I did ask that question about team dynamics. Thanks for
Yes.
not.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so this is one of my favorite experiences that I've had in Wipro while I was there. We had hired about 12 students with computer science background from Trivandrum with speech and hearing impairment. And they had their job posting in Mysore. So everything that they were prepared for in life went out of the window. They could not understand lip reading because people were not talking in Malayalam, they were talking in Kannada and English. They could not live with their hand signs that they had learned, the home signs, because you are now in a corporate, you had to do the American Sign Language. Those days, our Indian Sign Language was not yet formalized. And they had to learn, and we had only got a approval saying that instead of 3 weeks of training, these people will get 6 weeks of training, double the amount. But still, they had no clue. But at the end of this entire exercise, not only did that institute become a repeated institute where we went and got students, but the people in Mysore, the employees in Mysore, at least 1/3 of them learn sign language. And as part of an inclusion exercise, when we have meetings, we made a language break. Like you have a bio break and a tea break, we would stop and ask for a language break where everybody can talk in their own languages. And the people who are using sign languages will talk it with each other in sign language and say that, did you understand what the instructor gave? And Kannadigas would talk in Kannada, people from North India will talk in Hindi, whatever, right? So it became all the more inclusive. And more than anything else, they took the 6 weeks of training. They gave us the best documented training documentation because everything was written. So all the trainings happened, it got documented naturally, and they were on par with all other employees, right? So I thought I will share this very beautiful incident and experience that I have had by having persons with disability in the team.
Thank you, Anis. You brought out a very important point. Actually, one of the struggles with most IT organizations is that hesitation for engineers to document. By having this community, we are forced to document, and it creates best practices of reuse. That's the biggest advantage. Thank you for putting that thought in my head. Thank you for that. However, I want to admit, I'm sure both of you also agree, a lot of our narratives are still around motor skill and sensory issues. We still have a long way to go, Dr. Elizabeth and Anas, when it comes to neurological diversity. This is still work in progress, and people like us have to recognize it, and all of us have to think a little more deeply on how to make it better, is my opinion. I'm sure I'll learn a lot more from all of you. Thank you. But before I sign off, I want to do some key takeaways, key points you both brought out. Anas, you brought about making the digital, you started with saying make job portals accessible first, right? That is the starting point. That is the most powerful thing I got out of you while you're talking about team dynamics and other software aspects. Where is the starting point, right? Make the job portals accessible, powerful one. And Dr. Elizabeth talked about social inclusion, and social inclusion means various levels of understanding the issue, right? And bringing families to participate in the narrative and making them understand corporate dynamics so that they can help their relatives better. You talked about parents creating an environment where, Anas, you talked about, getting up in time, going to office, that whole, just creating that normal environment leads to a normalization of the integration is my viewpoint. Be as normal as possible and don't make it like it's a silk sari with jewelry, right? Let us make it a very, very normal thing to make it a way of life. Thank you for being part of this discussion. Are there any last minute thoughts from the two of you, or we could sign off? Is there anything?
I loved the enthusiasm with which we have tried to cover this issue as much as we could. But I believe that this enthusiasm has a long way to go. Like you said, we have to integrate a lot of angles. One very nice thing that I kind of take away from here is that, all of us have a very clear and good intent in bringing this 15% into the mainstream. But I think where we lack is that all of us have to join hands and kind of, work on different angles of the same issue and see that we provide better results. Like they say, together is better. I think together we can make that difference and make this group of people feel part of us and never let them feel out of place. And the actual meaning of diversity, equity, and inclusion is achieved only when we do this. So I think all of us with our different perspectives this can be the beginning, and we have a long way to go.
Absolutely. That's why we've chosen a panel like this to have different viewpoints, and I hope we will continue the narrative and try to make it.
Yes. Thank you.
From you.
Thank you.
Anas, anything you have to say? Or
just wanted to compliment everything that is being told. I believe that we going, not experiencing what a person with disability experiences completely ever. So let us not assume anything about a person with disability. Let us ask and be respectful in asking. And with that intent of inclusion, I'm sure we can make this a wonderful place to be in, make people's lives better, and run this planet as an inclusive society.
Thank you, Anas. And as you and I discussed before, we have to first recognize that in the digital world, at least, they are serious business consumers. We have to look at them as customers rather than being nice to them. That's my viewpoint. Digital solutions has to be provided for the 15%. They are customers for us. I would like to end with that note. Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth and Anas. Lovely talking to you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.